I'm going to give a quick explanation on how to use some of the important Zoom features for today's webinar. I will be sharing my screen to show you where you can find the images within the Zoom screen. So just give me 1 minute. So I hope everyone is able to see this PPT. First of all, if I may continue, I want to talk about the mute function, which allows you to mute your microphone. There is a microphone icon at the bottom left side of the Zoom toolbar. So once you click on the microphone icon, a red slash will appear over the microphone icon, indicating that your audio is now off. So please make sure that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking. This eliminates any background noise or interference in the audio. To unmute yourself during the Q&A session, click on the microphone button again, which will allow you to speak. The next important function is the interpretation function. On the bottom of your screen, far right, you will see a globe icon, which says interpretation, as shown here encircled with the red box. Once you click on the box, it will show you two audio channels. One is English, the other one is Japanese, but that is for Urdu language. So for all language speakers beside Urdu, please click on the English tab. For Urdu speakers, please click on the Japanese tab where the translation from English to Urdu will be provided. So in this webinar, you need to select a language. So it's either English language or Japanese/Urdu language to hear the speakers. Once you select the language, there's also another important function that you need to click. That is the mute original audio. It's located right below the language options. So what this does is that it allows you to mute the other audio channels so you will hear only either English or Japanese. If you do not select this feature, both audio channels will remain active. For example, if you click on the English, you will hear the Urdu language, but with a lower volume. And if you click the Japanese Urdu language, you'll still hear English in the background with the lower volume. So I request all the attendees to please select a language and also click on the mute original audio. The next important function is the chat function. The feature is located at the bottom center of the Zoom screen, which allows you to ask questions that you have during the webinar. This is for the speakers. So if you have any questions, please input them in the chat box. These questions will then be compiled and addressed during the Q&A session. The last important feature is the raise hand feature. During the Q&A sessions, if you are in your computer or your phone, you would need to click on the icon labeled participants at the bottom center of your screen. It is encircled in a red box here.
Sorry for joining late due to some network and computer issues. So if I rightly understand, we are talking about the article which was shared by
Sarbani, please go ahead, please.
Okay. So this is the last function. This is the raised hand function, which you will see. Once you click on the participants, a pop-up window will appear on the right side, which you will be given an option to raise your hand. As you can see on the icon here, encircled in a red box. Once you click on the raised hand icon, you will know your hand is raised when you see a hand next to your name in the participants list. This lets the speakers know that you have a question without interrupting the flow of the Q&A session. So when you're done asking your question, you can click on the raise hand icon again, which removes the hand icon next to your name. So these are the important features for today's webinar. Thank you for listening to me. Back to you, Janvi.
Thank you, Sarbani. Some of us are experts at Zoom by now, and I'm quite sure that we're well versed with some of these instructions. However, it is important to reiterate them for the smooth functioning of this webinar. I'd also request all of you to be on mute when somebody is speaking, but feel free to put your questions in the chat box or raise hands by the end of the meeting if you want to ask any question. Now, before we start, I'd like to provide a quick introduction to Vigo and HomeNet South Asia. Vigo is a global network of organizations and individuals focused towards improving the conditions of working poor, especially the informal economy women workers. It has been instrumental in initiating and supporting networks of informal economy workers. In fact, it is one of the founders of HomeNet South Asia. And HomeNet South Asia is a network of home-based worker organizations with 60 members across all South Asian countries. Collectively, we represent over 900,000 home-based workers, of which 95% are women. We have many of our members who have organized home workers in garment supply chain, and this toolkit is an outcome of their demand. We'd like to thank DFID, Women and Opportunities for Work program for supporting HNS and Vigo to build this toolkit. To make this toolkit, we followed an extensive consultative process. HNSA first reviewed the existing toolkits and consulted experts and our own members. The first draft of the toolkit was used to conduct a training of trainers for home worker leaders from Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. And the feedback was then incorporated, and now we have the final version of this toolkit. Now, before I start talking about the contents of this toolkit, I'd like to first give the floor to our home worker leaders from India and Pakistan. I'd first like to invite Jayalakshmi Dharman. Jayalakshmi is a home worker from Tirupur, India. She's been working as a home worker for more than 10 years now and has been living in Tirupur for over 25 years. She's been associated with SAVE, an organization working on the empowerment of women and elimination of child labor. And she's also the executive member of the newly formed trade union called Anugadam. Welcome, Jayalakshmi. I'd like to ask you to talk about your work, working conditions, and maybe a little bit about the toolkit training you attended in Nepal in February this year. Over to you, Jayalakshmi. And I'd also say when Jayalakshmi is speaking, she'll be speaking in Tamil, and Mary, one of her colleagues, she's going to translate for us in English. Over to you, Jayalakshmi.
Namaskaram.
பேசுங்க ஜெயலட்சுமி. பேசுங்க ஜெயலட்சுமி, உங்களை அறிமுகப்படுத்திட்டு பேசுங்க.
என் பேர் ஜெயலட்சுமி, பாண்டியநகர்ல இருந்து வரேன். அனுகதம் அந்த இதுல நம்பரா இருக்கேன். அப்புறம் வேற ட்ரிம்மிங், செக்கிங், பேக்கிங். அடுத்து வந்து மேல இருந்து அமௌண்ட் தரதுக்கு ஓனர், மேனேஜர் அவங்களோட கொஞ்சம் பிரச்சனை அந்த மாதிரி இது இருக்கு. அந்த ஓனர் ஒரு அமௌண்ட் தருவாங்க, மேனேஜர் அதை விட கம்மி பண்ணுவாங்க. அவங்க கிட்ட ஹெல்ப்பரா இருக்கிறவங்க அவங்க கொஞ்சம், சூப்பர்வைசர் கொஞ்சம் கம்மி பண்ணுவாங்க. அடுத்தடுத்து இருக்கிறவங்க எங்க கைக்கு வரும்போது ரொம்ப கம்மியா தான் அந்த அமௌண்ட் வருதுங்க.
ட்ரைனிங்க பத்தி சொல்லுங்க ஜெயலட்சுமி. ட்ரைனிங் நீங்க அட்டெண்ட் பண்ண ட்ரைனிங் எப்படி இருந்துச்சு, அதுல என்னென்ன கத்துக்கிட்டீங்கன்னு சொல்லுங்க.
அதுல வந்து ஒத்துமையா இருக்கிறத பத்தி கத்துக்கிட்டோம். ரொம்ப யூஸ்ஃபுல்லா இருந்துச்சு. டைம் தான் கிடைக்காம போயிருச்சு, கம்மியா போச்சு. ஆனா இன்னும் கொஞ்ச நாள் இருந்தா நல்லா இருந்திருக்கும். நிறைய வந்து தனிப்பட்ட முறையில எதுவும் செயல்பட முடியாது, ஒத்துமையா இருந்துதான் செயல்படணும். அந்த மாதிரிங்கிறது அங்க இருந்துதான் கத்துக்கிட்டோம். அதே மாதிரி தனிநபரா போய் எதுவும் பேச முடியாது. ஓனாத்தியா இருந்தாலும் 5 பேர் 10 பேர் சேர்ந்துதான் பேச முடியும். ஒரு ஆள் போனா நீங்க போங்க நாளைக்கு வாங்க அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி பேசுவாங்க. அது வந்து எப்படி ஒத்துமையா இருக்கணும்னா, அனுகதத்துல இருந்தோம்னா அங்க இருக்கிற ஆண்களோட சேர்ந்து ஒத்துமையா இருந்துக்கலாம். அப்புறம் நிறைய சொல்லி கொடுத்தாங்க. ஆனா ட்ரைனிங் தான் கம்மியா போச்சு.
வேற என்ன உங்களுக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்கு அந்த ட்ரைனிங்ல இருந்து?
வீட்டுல வேலை செய்யறத பத்தி எப்படி?
பேர் எதுவும் உங்களுக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்கா அந்த பயிற்சியில இருந்து?
வீட்டுல இருந்து ஒத்துமையா இருந்து வேலை செய்யணும், ஒத்துமையா தான் போய் ஒன்று செயல்படணும் அப்படிங்கிறது சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. அப்புறம் வந்து ஐயோ ஏதோ யோசனை மறந்துட்டேன்.
வேலை இடத்துல எப்படி வேலை பார்க்கணும் அப்படியெல்லாம் சொல்லி தந்தாங்களா? வேலை இடத்துல எப்படி பாதுகாப்பா வேலை செய்யணும்னு சொல்லி தந்தாங்களா?
ஆமா, அது வீட்டுல தானே பாக்குறோம், ஹோம் ஒர்க்கர் தானேங்க நாங்க. அப்ப வீட்டுல இருக்கிறவங்க வந்து பாதுகாப்பா இருக்கணும், சம்பளத்துக்கு லேட் பண்ணா இந்த மாதிரி எல்லாம் பேசாதீங்க, பீஸ் வந்து ட்ரிம் பண்ணிட்டீங்கன்னா கொடுத்ததுக்கு அப்புறம் அந்த அமௌண்ட்டை வாங்கிட்டு பீஸை கொடுங்க, நாளைக்கு இன்னைக்கு அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி இருந்தா அந்த வேலையை எதுக்காக செய்யணும் அந்த மாதிரி சொல்லியிருக்கிறாங்க. அதாவது பீஸை எடுக்க வரும்போதேவா அமௌண்ட்டை கொடுத்துட்டு எடுத்துட்டு போங்க, நீங்க ஏன் போய் அவங்க பின்னாடி அலையணும் அந்த மாதிரி சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. ஐயோ வேற என்ன?
Good, thank you. I mean, she is Jayalakshmi and she is from Tirupur, Tamil Nadu. It is in South India. She is doing a home-based work for the past 10 years, like checking the garment. I mean, quality checking of the garment and trimming the garments. I mean, excessive thread will be there. She has to trim it, and also she is a tailor. So these three kind of activities she was doing as a home-based workers. And then she was very happy to learn about the unity in the training. I mean, the other colleagues, I mean, whoever came and participated in Nepal was very interesting for her. It is a first new exposure for her. She was very excited and she wanted to learn more things from everyone in the training. I mean, she was related to how safely she has to work in the home. One thing. The second thing, I mean, the related to wage, she should not go behind. I mean, as a home workers, she should not go behind the person one who distributed the materials to them. I mean, when he is taking the goods from the home, she has to claim immediately. You keep the money and then you take your goods and go. Third thing, I mean, demanding the more money for the piece rate. If we go alone, the contractor may be asking us to not to give money, or he can say all the escapism words. But she learned that we have to go as a collective so that we can win. So this kind of knowledge she is getting through that training, and she's continuously repeatedly talking about unity. We have to be united for our welfare and the rights. This was her mind is going on, overblowing within her from this training. If there is any question, she will answer that. This is what she has stopped. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayalakshmi, and thank you, Mary. In fact, Jayalakshmi and there were two other participants from Tirupur. They really stressed upon the power of union, and in fact, they pushed on certain strategies which we've now included in the toolkit. So thank you, Jayalakshmi. Now, I'd like to invite another very dynamic home worker leader, Shabnam Hani from Karachi, Pakistan. She's a leader at Home-Based Women's Workers Federation. She started her career as a home-based worker, but eventually became a full-time organizer for the union. Home-Based Women's Workers Federation is a leading trade union in Pakistan organizing home-based workers and has been instrumental in getting the policy for home-based workers in the Sindh province. I'd give the floor to Shabnam. Shabnam, I'd like to request you to talk about your work and the issues faced by home workers in garment supply chain in Karachi and briefly talk about the toolkit training. Over to you, Shabnam. Sorry, I think there is an internet issue that Shabnam has been facing. There has been, I think the weather conditions aren't really great in Karachi.
No, I'm here.
Oh, wonderful.
No, I'm here.
That's great, Shabnam, you could join.
Hi, Janvi.
So over to you. Please talk about your experiences.
जी, मेरा नाम शबनम है और मैं कराची.
My name is Shabnam. I'm from Karachi. I am associated with Home Worker Federation. Around 6 years ago, I joined here. The conditions of home were not good. So I started as a home-based worker. When I started my work, then I realized that how home-based workers, how they are working whole day, but they are getting peanuts. Their condition. So I worked with them as a home-based worker for one whole year. And during this period also, I joined Home-Based Workers Federation. Many ladies were working there. And after that, when I met them, I sat with them, then I felt good. And I learned a lot of things about the issues of the home-based workers, their conditions and their wages, and their issues and their meetings. So I joined them, joined the federation, and also I felt very good. Sitting with them, learning from them is a good experience. The issues related to health and safety in the workplace made me realize, felt the need to join them officially, regularly, and to work for the home-based workers as long as I can until I live. So then for one year I worked for the beads. Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. As a home-based worker, I work for in the beads business. Then I started my work as a leader for the home-based workers. So like most of the places, the condition of the workers was the same. I organized the lady workers, and I increased the membership among the women. As a result of this organization, we achieved many success. And we were able to make our policies implemented. I will speak further about it. Our federation is working on these issues. First of all, we are working for organizing the workers, the ladies, the home-based worker ladies, about their identity, about their wages, and also their social protection and the harassment in the workplace. We are dealing with such issues and cases in the workplace. As a member of the Home-Based Worker Federation, I felt very good. I'm very happy that, the women are able to understand these issues, and they're also joining us. Our policy is towards registration. Regarding the training of the toolkit was very effective for us, very useful for us. I feel that all the issues of the home-based workers have been encapsulated in the toolkit. In the toolkit, I have read so many issues that we have been facing in our lives that have been reflected in this toolkit. The minimum wage and the standard wage, the difference between the two. All of us, we have understood this. The members of our federations have given good response to this. I have also learned new things. Transparency, they talk about the transparency that was very effective and useful for us. The varieties of the global supply chain was also very important topic for us. That gave us an opportunity to learn new things. The supply chain work in our is related with the home-based workers in our country. In many places, we have got the work of the brand. We created link with the brands. What is supply chain, how it operates? A lot of awareness has been generated by the federation. The training in Nepal was also very helpful for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shabnam. Thank you for sharing all the work you've been doing and your organization has been doing, and also about the training. I'm really glad that it was useful for you, but just to inform the rest of you that while we were still finalizing this particular toolkit and then trying to translate it into different languages, Shabnam has gone ahead and she's just translated a few chapters which she felt were the most relevant and has started doing trainings in Karachi. So thanks a lot, Shabnam. Now I'd like to shift the focus to the toolkit and what do we have in the toolkit. So I'm just going to share the screen. So give me just a moment. Right, I just want to check, is it visible to everybody? Can one of you just unmute and let me know if it's visible?
Yes, it is.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, so just before we start, we wanted to answer a few questions. You know, we were asked when we were sending out this invite, who is this toolkit for? Now, both Shabnam and Jaylakshmi have talked about the fact that it is very useful for home-based worker leaders. It's also very important for home-based worker organizations and trade unions. We also believe it's important or useful for employers, the retail companies and brands. If they want transparency till the last mile, this toolkit is very helpful for them. We also believe it's important for government bodies to look at this toolkit if they want to provide recognition to home-based workers, to understand the situation of home workers and garment supply chain. It is an important toolkit for them. And it is important for training organizations who train around supply chains, garment supply chains, home workers. And it's very important for researchers because it has a lot of important content. The second question we wanted to answer was, how can this toolkit be really used? We have almost 100-page toolkit. You can use it to have training on various topics that it has, but you can also just use a few chapters out of it and conduct training. Say, for example, on violence in supply chains. You could just use that particular chapter and have training specifically for that. You know, Shabnam also touched upon it, that it is used as an organizing tool. You know, when trade unions organize and recruit members, it has become an important organizing tool for them. It can also be used as an advocacy tool. When we were doing trainings, they found it very important. You know, there's a chapter on social protection where we've listed all these social assistance programs provided by the government. And they said, we may use this as an advocacy tool. This toolkit can also be used to create transparency. There are various tools provided there. And lastly, what Shabnam talked about, and even Jay Lakshmi, how to calculate piece rates to match minimum wages. So we have a separate chapter on that. Now, also just to say that we have 10 chapters in this toolkit, and we decided on these 10 chapters depending on the needs of our members. So the first chapter is about introduction to home workers. The second is about key issues faced by home workers. The third chapter is on global garment supply chain and home workers. The fourth chapter is on organizing. The fifth on minimum wage. The sixth chapter on social security and social protection. The seventh chapter on occupational safety and health. The eighth chapter is on violence at workplace. The ninth chapter on child labor. And the last chapter is on transparency and traceability too. Now, I'd like to go a little bit in detail about what do we have. I mean, what is the content in each of these chapters? The first chapter on introduction to home workers, we've actually talked about the distinction between the two categories of home-based workers. The first, the self-employed or the own account home-based workers, and the second, the subcontracted home workers or the piece rate workers or the home workers as we know. And just at the outset, I'd like to say that this toolkit is designed specifically for home workers in garment supply chains. In this chapter, we've also listed the different trades in which home workers work. So they work across many, not just garment sector. And then we've introduced home workers specifically in the garment sector. The second chapter is about the issues faced by home workers. Now, the first and key issue that we've listed is lack of recognition as workers. Now, this has been the key reason, why home workers face so many issues. So a lot of us already know that apart from Pakistan, no other country in South Asia has a policy for home workers. The employers do recognize home workers when they do embellishment sort of work. But if they're doing the work which Jay Lakshmi talked about finishing, checking, it's convenient for them to just keep them hidden. So lack of recognition has been a key issue. The second issue we've talked about is low wages, irregular payments, burden of production cost. When we say burden of production cost, it's the electricity bills that they get because of the work, but it's also about the machines, the sewing machines that they use, or the amount of money they invest in buying threads, scissors, and all those things. We've also touched upon irregular work orders or the seasonality of work for home workers, lack of organization. A lot of us already know home workers are one of the toughest category of workers to organize because they work from their own homes and individually. We've also talked about occupational safety and health, lack of social security, violence faced in supply chains, and lack of legal protection. The third chapter talks about global garment supply chains and home workers. I mean, we talk about the various layers and role of actors within the garment supply chains, the location and role of home workers within the supply chains, and the key difference between the domestic and global supply chains. We've given a few supply chains which we've found on the ground. This is just a sample where we've tried to show how global brands actually provide workers to home workers through a series of suppliers, sub-suppliers, contractors, and subcontractors. The fourth chapter is on organizing, the need for home workers to organize to address various issues related to access to decent work and working conditions, and the different forms and strategies of organizing along with its benefits. So these are all the cases that we've observed. So as you know, home workers organizing as trade unions, self-help groups, cooperatives or producer companies, networks of organizations, and community-based organizations. We've also tried to pick some good practices from the ground and we've added it to the toolkit. I'm just giving you one example, there are many in the toolkit. This is of Rangasutra, which is a producer company. And some of the good practices that they have, like moving up the value chain, where home workers have this access to move up the value chain. There's greater transparency in the supply chain. They have regular work. They promote ethically made products and are able to get minimum wages. The fifth chapter, and this chapter was the most popular chapter with our workers, about minimum wages. Here we've tried to introduce the concept of minimum wages, as well as during our training, we actually taught them how to calculate minimum wages, calculate piece rate to match the minimum wage. We also had a session on how to calculate piece rate to match the minimum wage with inclusion of all the associated tasks. And when we say associated tasks, we mean, packing and unpacking of raw material, time taken to, say, for example, set up a loom, or just rest time, which they have. So we've tried to see how we can include all of this. We know we're very far away from living wages, but we've also introduced the concept of living wage and how home workers can use this for collective bargaining and negotiation with contractors and intermediaries. The next chapter is on social security, or maybe the lack of social security that home workers have. Employers don't recognize home workers as workers in their supply chain, and therefore home workers don't have access to employer provided social security. However, we have found one good practice on the ground. We have a member organization, Sadhana, where they've negotiated with brands to include Provident Fund and ESI within the piece rates. We've described this in the toolkit, but just to let you know, these examples are very few. The next thing that we've included in the toolkit is the various social protection and assistance schemes available for informal workers, including home workers in Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Maldives, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. The seventh chapter is about occupational safety and health, the different OSH issues faced by home workers in the garment sector, and the country-specific provisions related to OSH laws. We've also, described how, the situation of home workers can be improved, OSH issues. So, say, for example, through protective gears, ergonomics, insurance against accidents, establishing safe and common workplaces, housing design intervention, equipping homes with first aid kits and fire extinguishers, and material handling and storage. Again, we've picked some good practices from the field and added to the toolkit. The next chapter is on violence at workplace. For home-based workers, their home is their workplace. So we've touched upon domestic violence, as well as violence faced in the supply chain by contractors and middlemen. We've talked about the impact of violence on the productivity as well as the well-being of home workers. We've also listed some of the existing laws against violence and harassment at workplace in different countries. And we've also listed the complaint systems or mechanisms that exist. Just to add that when COVID-19 happened, a lot of our members also said they wanted more material specifically on this issue, and therefore we've partnered with UNICEF Rosa to have awareness and training materials specifically for violence faced by home workers. The 9th chapter is about child labor. It introduces child labor in home-based work, as well as the international instruments and country-specific laws and policies that we have to prevent child labor. We've also talked about the importance of establishing child labor-free zones, and we've listed some of the good practices that we have on the field. Say, for example, SAVE, who's here, has established child labor-free zones, and Sabha in Nepal has ensured that these workplaces that they have made are child labor-free. We've also touched upon the importance and the need for childcare centers. A lot of home workers, in fact, this is an issue very close to their heart. They're unable to work for more hours because they have to take care of the children, and they've talked about the importance of childcare centers. The last chapter that we have in the toolkit is on transparency and traceability tools, the need of home workers regarding transparency in the supply chains. We've talked about what are the various tools that we can have. So we've given a sample contract letter, also a sample logbook, which can be countersigned by home workers as well as the contractors and subcontractors. We've also talked about traceability tools and mapping of supply chains. And lastly, we've talked about the rejection handling mechanism and some approaches that home workers can use. So this is in a nutshell what we have in this toolkit. This is the toolkit that we have. It's a 100-page toolkit. It's quite a lot, but it's been very interestingly provided and very easy to read. So now we have this on our website. It's being launched today. So feel free to go onto our website and have a look at our toolkit. On the demand of our members, we are also translating this toolkit in Hindi, Urdu, Nepali, Bengali, and Tamil. And there was an additional request from our members, which was to have an accompanying activity book, which they can use for trainings. So we're also working on that, and hopefully in a month, we should have it up on our website. So please go onto our website and look out for these resources. So I'm going to stop here on the toolkit. Thank you, everybody. And now I'm going to open the floor for the rest of the participants for any questions they have for Jay Lakshmi or Shabnam or for me, or specifically regarding the toolkit. So you can type on to the chat box any questions that you have, but you can also raise hands and ask the question directly. So over to the participants now. All right, any questions that you have? Okay, one question that had come was about, is there any way of calculating living wage? And what we have done is we have tried to put across the concept of living wage, why it is important, but we've also talked about what are the needs, and then we've described briefly about how to calculate living wage. So that is a part of the toolkit. Yeah, so people can go through that and read upon that. Any other questions? All right, so Laura's asked, she's asked that how long did it take to work on this toolkit? So Laura, it took us 3 months to work on the toolkit. We sent it to the experts, our member organizations got their feedback and reworked on it. So that totaled up to 5 months. Then we had a training, and it took us another 3 months to rework on the toolkit. So all in all, some 8 months. All right. Maha's question is there. She's asking, she said, excellent resource. I wonder how some of the participants here might use chapter on violence. Are the confidential conversations at community level? I mean, this is a question for a lot of you, a lot of organizations. What I can just tell to Maha is that, I was also trained to have this, you have to deal with the issues of violence with a lot of care, and that's what we do. But specifically for home workers in urban spaces, some of them just come up with their stories very easily. I, in fact, did FGDs, and some of my colleagues did in Delhi, and they're part of the union. Firstly, there is this, connection which they have with the organization. So they find it comfortable to talk in a union. And the second thing which they cited was, when one person is facing violence, the neighbors know about it. They live in informal settlements, which which are next to each other. Everybody knows about it. So it's not so discreet for them. And what we found is that people talk. In union meetings, they talk to each other. So it's been easier for us to work on this issue with organized home workers. All right, I'm just going to the next few questions. There's a question from Sarah. She's asked, how was domestic violence addressed? Were there challenges on sensitivity? I just mentioned, you know, there is the sensitivity question here, but also these are organized workers with whom we are working right now. So the trust building exercise has already happened. And when we talk about, and also this chapter doesn't go much into detail about violence. It actually is more informative in the sense it talks about, you know, what are the laws which can be used? What are the complaint mechanisms that you have? And why does it exist? And the fact that you're not the only one, right? So these are simple things, but of course, if we have a much detailed training, we'll have to look at maybe 3 or 4 days of training just on this particular issue. I think Kazi Babyji has a hand up for a while, so should we just give her some space? Kazi Babyji, if we can unmute her.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And thank you. I just heard your presentation, and also I was late, but I think it was good presentation. And about the toolkit, I just wanted to mention, I already have seen it, and actually I think it would be better or good if you make it translation in Bengali, in Hindi, so that the home-based worker, the poor community, they will understand, because they will not understand the English. So you can keep it in your mind, this one. And also the it is really, it is a good toolkit. I don't know who have prepared it, but credit should goes to Hansha. And if you try to make it more pictorial, then the home-based worker will understand it. So this is my suggestion from PDAP or from Bangladesh. Thank you.
So thank you, Kazi Babyji. Kazi Babyji comes from this organization called PDAP, who's also part of Coalition of Urban Poor, and they are HNSA members. And thank you, Kazi Babyji. You know, some of your inputs, you keep us in check. You know, some of these inputs are very important for us. And this is one of the reasons we are translating it into Bengali also. Your point taken on, it needs to be more pictorial. We've tried to keep it pictorial, but we can relook at that aspect of it also. Shabnam has also asked a similar question, that when can the translated toolkit be available for us? So Shabnam, if you can wait for 3 more months, we will have it up on our websites in the next quarter or so. There are more questions. There is one question from Elizabeth, where she's asked how social security benefits can be availed by home-based workers as they are not recognized by principal employer or company. So just to say, yes, the employer provided social security is not available for home-based workers. And we find that whenever we're talking to the brands, you know, they don't call them home-based workers. Even the ones who would recognize them would call them artisans or micro-entrepreneurs. Because as soon as they call them workers, they feel they're bound to provide social security to them. So they are evading this entire question. And we also feel that's one of the reasons they don't want to recognize home-based workers. I gave you an example of only one organization. We found, Sadhana, that, you know, they've been getting orders from a few brands on a regular basis. And when they kept getting these orders, they negotiated that in piece rates, some component of PF and ESI needs to be included. So it's a creative way of doing it, and they had the negotiating power, also because they've been working with the same brands for a very long time. But these sort of cases are very few. What home-based workers do have is access to some of the social assistance programs, social protection programs that the government has. And what we've seen is even these are not really accessible for home-based workers. until unless they're part of an organized group. So a trade union or a CBO, then they're really not able to access these social protection or social assistance programs. All right, the next question is from Samir, and he's asked, this is a question for Jay Lakshmi, so I need support from Mary. The question is, did you face any challenges while participating in union activities, especially from contractor employers, and how did the union respond to it?
Yeah, Jay Lakshmi will answer for it. I think already she read it.
எங்களுக்குன்னு அந்த டீம் இருக்குது, அந்த டீம் மூலமா போய் நாங்க அதை சால்வ் பண்ணிக்கிறோம்.
I mean, within the union, they have divided the roles and responsibility for addressing the violence. Separate team is there, addressing for the wage settling process, and then social security process. This kind of with a team is there in inside the Anagadam. With their support, they will handle such kind of issues.
Okay, so then there is this other question by Maha, and she's requesting others to put it on chat box. She's saying, excellent, so important to have resources like this in violence against women conversation. Thank you, Janvi. Would love to hear from others too, perhaps in the chat. The trust that your groups have established at the community level is so valuable to survivors and to change the perception and understanding of violence. So if others want to put in chat box, please respond to Maha's question and comment. The last one that I have here is from Asma Ravji. She's saying this is a good resource. Has this been shared with employers and how receptive they are? So good question, Asma. So Asma, this has not been shared with employers. This is made specifically for home workers. It's not being made for employers. Now we do hear many organizations are looking at building toolkits for brands, for employers. And as you know, Asma, that there is no clear employer for home workers. There's series of employers, right? So there's a primary employer, which is a brand, but there are a series of contract suppliers, contractors, subcontractors. So we'll also have to focus. Each category is fairly different for home workers. And who are we dealing with? When we say employer, it's not one category of employers that we're looking at. All right, the next question is from Elizabeth. Any sexual harassment cases by contractors, agents been reported in line with our discussion at the concerned authority? Elizabeth, I can just quickly answer you on this is, you know, when, especially during this time of pandemic, when COVID-19 started and the lockdown started in India, in Nepal, some of our member organizations did talk to us about the fact that home workers were facing a lot of violence. They tried to call the police because the helplines initially were shut down. And when they tried to call the police in fact refused to file any complaint or even respond to it is because they were too busy implementing the lockdown. They had no time to attend to any issues of domestic violence. So it has been reported a lot. Now, talking about, you know, now that the economies are slowly opening up and some amount of work is coming through, and members are reporting that the very little work that they're getting is, I mean, the contractors are also asking for sexual favors in return of work. But these have not been reported as yet. I know how a lot of members deal within, say, trade union form is that if anybody faces violence at the hands of subcontractors, they get together, they discuss, and then they ensure the subcontractor doesn't provide work and nobody takes work in that particular locality or from the union. So this has been some of the strategies in the past. Okay, anything from Namita? This is congratulations, HNSA. I've attended the Toolkit training. It was very good training. We will use it for training home-based worker members in Delhi. Thank you, Namita. Thank you for that. And we actually have last few minutes before we end. Anything else or any other questions that people have? All right, Sarah and Melissa, I see a few questions coming up. Sarah is asking, what were the most helpful part of the toolkit and trainings for home workers, in addition to the piece rate calculation? Sarah, when we were doing this training in Nepal, we did it in February this year. And what we found was, piece rate calculation was one of their most favorite. In fact, we were a little skeptical because it had a lot of calculation required and different formulas we were introducing to, but home-based workers were quick at picking that up. The other chapter, which was a big hit with members, was on organizing, and the other was on these transparency tools. So these were some other chapters which they quite liked. I think I forgot one chapter which was about traceability. How do you map supply chains? And each group was given time to provide some of the supply chains that exist in their own locations. They were excellent at that, and we have some great diagrams and supply chain that from all these locations. We have a comment from Melissa. Congratulations on the launch of the toolkit. What are the top 3 things that home-based workers need or changes that they want to see as we try to recover from COVID-19? Melissa, this is definitely a question for Shabnam and Jayalakshmi. So Shabnam and Jayalakshmi, the question is, what are the top 3 things that home-based workers need or changes that you want at this point of time during the pandemic?
Jayalakshmi?
Do you want me to repeat the question?
ஜெயலட்சுமி, என்ன மாற்றங்கள் இந்த COVID-19க்கு பிறகு வரணும்னு நீங்க நினைக்கிறீங்க தொழிலாளர்களுக்கு? வீட்ல இருந்து வேலை செய்யறவங்களுக்கு கோவிட் என்ன இருக்கணும்?
வீட்டுல இருந்தா அமௌண்ட் ஏதாவது ரிட்டையர்ட் ஆகிற வயசாச்சுன்னா அவங்களுக்கு எந்த வருமானம் கிடையாது. அவங்களுக்கு ஏதாவது ஒரு சலுகை கிடைக்கணும். அப்புறம் அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு ஆக்சிடென்ட்டோ ஒரு விபத்தோ எதானாலும் எந்த பிரயோஜனமும் இல்லை. அதுக்கு ஏதாவது ஒரு வழி இருந்தா நல்லா இருக்கும்.
வேலை இருக்கா இப்போ? வேலை இருக்கா இப்போ எல்லாருக்கும்?
வேலை இல்ல அதிகமா இல்ல, ஒர்க்கே இல்ல, ஃப்ரீ தான். சாப்பாடு கூட ரொம்ப சிரமப்படுறவங்க இருக்காங்க, வாடகை கொடுக்க முடியாம, அதனால கஷ்டத்துலதான் இருக்காங்க. அது இந்த டைம்ல சொல்ல வேண்டியது இல்லை.
Okay, thank you, Jayalakshmi. There are 2 things she is expecting. One is the home-based workers have to get employment opportunity now after COVID-19, because during the pandemic there was no work. I mean, they have struggled a lot. The second thing, social security. I mean, this pandemic has taught them that without savings, how they have suffered all this month. So, and then if there is any accident or anything had happened, nothing was there. So one is work, the second is social security.
All right, Shabnam, by any chance, do you want to also answer this question, that what are the top 3 demands that you have during this pandemic right now for home workers? Sorry, Shabnam, are you there? All right, I think if Shabnam can answer that question, that's great. But the other question is from Elizabeth, which is to ask that during COVID time, how is payment mode done to workers? Do they prefer digital payment or digital transfers? Do they have bank accounts, Paytm, Google Pay, etc.? Elizabeth, because we're running short of time, I'm not going to ask the workers themselves, but I'll quickly answer this question is, like what Jayalakshmi said, there isn't enough work to start with, right? And if these home workers are part of any cooperative or a producer company, they are open to taking payments in, through any sort of digital transfers, but a lot of training is required around that. So say, for example, we have a member in Nepal called Sabha Nepal, and they have Kalti as an app. They had to do a lot of training before the pandemic to get members on board. So it's not a very simple yes or no question. For many members, there is no work to even get payment. And the second is, if the part of producer companies or cooperatives, it's a lot easier, right? Okay, so thank you. I think now we've absolutely run short of time, but thank you everybody for participating. I'd like to especially thank Vigo, Marty Chen, Chris Bonner, and Marlies Montbremsen for contributing to the toolkit. From HomeNet South Asia and Seva Bharat, we have Renana Chapwala, who also contributed, and Firoza Mehrotra. I'd also especially like to thank Prabha Pokhriyal from Nepal, from Home-Based Worker Concern Society. She sent a lot of details and inputs. We'd like to thank all our members who kept pushing us to do much better on this toolkit. And thank you to all the women home workers who attended this training of trainer in Nepal. So thank you everyone, and thank you DFID WOW for supporting us in building this toolkit. So thank you everyone. Thank you for attending this toolkit and the launch of our toolkit. And so bye-bye everyone, keep safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayalakshmi.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah.